Bhagavad Gita is not typically a scripture of sort. It's more of a way of life. Keep on performing your duty and don't abandon your work if you don't get the reward. I could find an answer to all my problems if I refer to Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita doesn't talk about bhagya, doesn't talk about destiny. Human beings are not the physical entity who come to this world for a spiritual experience. Human beings are essentially spiritual beings who come to the world for a physical experience.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode. On this auspicious occasion of Janmashtami, I have the honor to share with you all my conversation with Vinod Malhotra ji. Sir has had an illustrious career that spans diverse experiences and accomplishments. His unwavering passion and wisdom on life comes from the sacred Bhagavad Gita. He's also authored over 22 books that talks about the essence of life and the teachings of the Gita. Let's together embark on a journey through the timeless wisdom of the Gita.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
So before we start this conversation, can I request you to chant a mantra which is dear to you and maybe explain our audience and energize this conversation?
All right. This is a mantra from the longest Upanishad that we have in Vedanta system called Virhadra Aranyak Upanishad. It says, Asato ma sadagamaya tamso ma jyotirgamaya vrityurma amritomo gamaya. Essentially, it means that lead us from untruth to truth, lead us from darkness to light, and lead us from death to immortality. So it's a very profound three major pillars of this particular verse, which has application in a universal context.
That was so beautiful. I can feel the change in energy in the room already. A lot of books that you've written has been on the terms of Bhagavad Gita. Can I request you to introduce Bhagavad Gita to someone who would have no idea what it is and maybe just explain in a manner that some people would understand?
You see, Bhagavad Gita is essentially an integral part of one of the greatest epics that we have in our country called Mahabharata. Mahabharata essentially was a kind of a battle fought in the grounds of what is called Kurukshetra, a place in the northern part of India. It all became as some kind of a war between the two wings of a family, the same clan, called the Kuru Vansha, the Kauravas and Pandavas. The Kauravas being headed by Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra, his father, and Pandavas by Yudhishthira and Arjuna and his brother. Now, essentially there was a fight between who's going to own what part of the land, what part of the property. And Duryodhana, who was representing the Kaurav clan, was very obstinate, very obdurate. He refused to part even with an inch of land, which legitimately belonged to the Pandavas also. So it was essentially a fight between the Kauravas and Pandavas. And as I mentioned, an integral part of epic called Mahabharata was written by a sage Veda Vyasa. So Bhagavad Gita forms a part of this particular epic, wherein Arjun, when he faces some of his relations, some of his friends and relatives and cousins and fathers and gurus and grandfathers, is extremely depressed, is very crestfallen. He says he refuses to fight against them. He says, I don't want to be responsible for their death. This is where Krishna comes in as his friend, who calls him his Sakha, his friend and guide, philosopher, etc. Now, he tells him that you need to perform your duty. You must fight against injustice. If something which legitimately belongs to you is being taken away from you, being snatched from you in an illegal manner, you need to fight against that. This is where the philosophy of Karam Yoga, with most of us associate Bhagavad Gita with, came into being. He says you need to pick up your bow and arrow, fight against injustice, get your legitimate due, and don't worry about the results. In fact, the iconic verse in Bhagavad Gita in second chapter really espouses the entire philosophy of Karma Yoga. Karmanneva adhikaraste ma phaleshu gadachana ma karm phal hetu bhurmate sangvastu karmani. Majority of Indians seem to be aware of this particular shloka, which only says that you have right on the duty and not on the reward. Keep on performing your duty and don't abandon your work if you don't get the reward. So this is the most profound message of Bhagavad Gita. Now, in the midst of that war, Krishna really took Arjun on a long journey of trying to explain to him his responsibilities, his duties, his dharma. And in that process, he delivered one of the most profound messages which is relevant for the entire mankind. So Bhagavad Gita is not typically a scripture of sort. It's more of a way of life. He then starts dealing with all kinds of the cosmic energy, his own personal representation, his own power that the God wields, the universal consciousness, the energy, the devotion part of it, the karma part of it, the knowledge part of it. So the multiple processes of yoga which are mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, ideally speaking, one if I can briefly mention Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, Dhyana Yoga. The different forms of yogas are spelled out beautifully in Bhagavad Gita. And that's the reason why it is hailed as one of the finest philosophical documents in the world. Just to quote one gentleman, Aldous Huxley, who's a British philosopher, a lot of people know about him. He says Bhagavad Gita is the finest philosophical document till date, which has relevance not only for Indians, but for the entire mankind.
Definitely. People believe it's a religious scripture, but purely a way of life, like you said.
Yeah, you see, the kind of message it contains, it concerns everyone in day-to-day life. What am I supposed to be doing? Am I doing the right thing? Gives you a sense of discrimination, tells you between, and listen to your own voice of your own conscience. And also categorizes different action that we do. In fact, one of the very important components of Bhagavad Gita is to categorize the attributes of every human being into three different categories, which are sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. He says every individual in this world, in terms of his thought, in terms of action, in terms of his energy, in terms of food that he eats, in terms of the karmas that he does, in terms of the jnana that he has, all are conditioned driven by these three different gunas. And the prevalence of one over the other establishes a reputation. He says nobody in this world is without bereft of these three gunas in some form than other. But some people are more sattvic than rajasic. Some are more tamasic than rajasic. But if you're predominantly if you have a purity of heart, if you don't hurt anybody, if you speak the truth, if you have strong moral values, then you become sattvic.
Can you explain the viewers the gunas that you said in English?
Yes, the sattvic really represents a person who's spiritually grounded, who speaks the truth, who is morally very, very strong. He doesn't hurt anybody deliberately. He's nice and soft and affectionate with everyone. The rajasic really is more of a person who is very worldly minded. He leads a very active life. He wants the comforts and pleasures. He wants to earn money. He wants to have family. Deeply involved in the worldly affairs. Not that sattvic is not, but he has sense of detachment. Rajasic person is deeply involved, attached with everyone, his family, children, money, power, etc.
So is it purity and materialistic?
So yes, you're right. Purity and materialism. And the tamasic is a person who would be really, the lowest rung of social human being. He doesn't mind telling a lie. He doesn't mind hurting anybody. He's very slovenly, very lazy, very not the kind of person who would be interested in doing anything at all. So the three categories, and you probably find people of this nature, different categories in every part of the world.
So are you trying to say that we need a proper balance between the three, or what is your take on it?
So this is again where I'm glad you asked this question, because this is also a very strong message Bhagavad Gita gives. They say, Yogastha kuru karam kani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddha same bhutva samatvam yogi uchyate. Samatvam, samata, equilibrium, equanimity. See, suggest to take a middle path. Don't become too happy jumping away that you get something. Don't become depressed if you don't get. Sukh dukkhe samay kritva labha labho jayajo. This is where one of the important verses of Bhagavad Gita. Sukh dukkhe samay kritva. labha labhu jaya jo. Treat happiness and misery, loss and victory, getting possession or not getting possession on equal footing.
Beautiful.
And if you stay rooted and grounded and become completely at the state of equanimity and equilibrium, you will never come to any harm. So that's so. And answer to your question would another be a very interesting one. He says, do everything in a very moderate manner, in moderation. We tend to go to extremes and then we get into trouble. He says, Yukta har viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu, yukta swapna bodhasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. He says, eat in moderation, work in moderation, don't go overboard. I mean, you don't just sort of, often people tend to completely drown themselves into work and files and this, that, and other, and they forget about the other responsibilities. He says, Yukta cheshtasya karmasu, even in your work, you should be moderate. Yukta swapna bodhasya, sleep moderate hours, 7 to 8 hours. Don't sleep for 12, 14, 13 hours like lazy bums. So that is one of the biggest advices, that live in moderation, follow middle path, and you will never come to any harm.
Beautiful. Personal question about Bhagavad Gita and your connection, that when was the first time did you come across Bhagavad Gita and you were really interested, intrigued in knowing more about it?
I've written about 22 books already, and they're different subjects. But much of them have been inspired by Bhagavad Gita, I must admit that. On Bhagavad Gita, connected with on happiness, on way of life, on management principles, in terms of how do you relate to the people and things of this kind. Several books form part of the overall 20-odd books that I've written. In fact, a very interesting book that I recently wrote, both in English and Hindi, is also part of an offshoot of Bhagavad Gita, which is supposed to be a very radical work on Advaita philosophy, Vedanta, which is non-duality, which is our the most profound component of our Vedanta philosophy, called Ashtavakra Gita, which is, people hail it as a purest scripture in the world, but that's at a different level altogether. You see, my connect with Bhagavad Gita, I must say, goes back to my early childhood. My father was very spiritual, so he kind of introduced us to, he used to go to the temple next to our house, and he asked me to sort of look at this book. And at that point of time, we did not really understand fully the implications of Bhagavad Gita. It is more of a chanting and devotional aspect, sitting in the temple and chanting some shlokas and getting some awards and this, that, and other. But as I moved into my service, job, and this, that, and other, and some kind of an understanding of the word started dawning upon you, responsibilities and the way of life, then I sort of started looking deeper into this. And I found that I could find an answer to all my problems if I refer to Bhagavad Gita. In a way, it somewhat echoes the statement made by Mahatma Gandhi. Very interesting, must share that with you. He says, I fought several wars against British Empire, the most powerful empire in the world. I fought a non-violent war, whatever, to just get freedom from the country, for the country. And the reason I did not come to any harm, neither, maybe physically I was kind of tortured, into the business, but my soul, my mind, my intellect went completely unscathed, unaffected, primarily because of Bhagavad Gita. Whenever I was in doubt, I took refuge under Bhagavad Gita, almost like a mother, and I was never disappointed. So that's a kind of a depth that you have. It protects you like a guide, a friend, a philosopher, a mother, and a father. You name it and you have it in Bhagavad Gita. I cannot think of even a single activity or a single experience that you go through in your life which does not find mention or does not find an echo in the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. I need to say no more about it.
Is it true? I've heard a lot about it, that if you open a random page of a Bhagavad Gita, it would connect to your current problem and you will find a solution through it as well.
Well, you see, that's providential. I mean, it may happen or may not happen. And coming to that, it's also important for us to understand that Bhagavad Gita doesn't talk about bhagya, it doesn't talk about destiny. That's a very, very important thing. We often get misled by the fact, oh, my kismat, my destiny, what can I do about that? No, Bhagavad Gita categorically mentioned. It says one place, Udret Atmanam Atmanam Vasadayet Atmai Atmana Bandhu Atmai Ripur Atmana. He says, keep on elevating you all the time. Keep on raising your standard. You are your biggest enemy and you are your best friend. Nobody else. So where does destiny come in? You make your own destiny.
Create yourself.
If you fight your war upfront. Interestingly, also, if you look at the context where the battlefield where Arjun was given this discourse by Krishna, it was very similar to the kind of life that we lead. Yes, life is a war. It's a battlefield.
Yes.
You need to fight your own battles. But how do you fight it? Depends entirely upon you. What is your karmas? What is your strategy? What is your philosophy? What is your thought process? And Bhagavad Gita gives you that guide. That you take your life as it comes, take it in your own stride, take it with sense of equanimity. Don't do anything wrong. Don't hurt anybody at all. Don't resort to any wrong means to empower yourself or enrich yourself. So that's what really.
Like you very beautifully said, that it connects to life. Can you explain how Bhagavad Gita and the chariot that Krishna and Arjun was on depicts a body and a mind and the different parts of our life in the system?
So that's a very interesting question. You see, before I explain this context to you, I must mention this is a beautiful description of this question that you asked is in Kathopanishad, one of the famous Upanishads and part of Vedanta philosophy. Before that, I just would like to mention one verse from Bhagavad Gita, which actually makes better sense when I answer this question, which says, Indriyani paranyahu indrebhe paramana manasastu parabuddhe yo buddhe paratastu sa. If you look at your cell, the hierarchy of structure that we have.
Right.
You start with body, then you have your senses, your indriya, which is called the senses like the ear, the nose, and the skin, and the taste and eyes and everything. 5. Indriyani paranyam indrebhe paramanayam. You have the body, indriya, mana, intellect, and soul. So this is the level. So when you're talking about this question about chariot and Krishna and everything, see, the horses are like the indriya, the senses. Always tend to move outward. They want to run away. Horses, they got to be controlled by the reins. And the reins are in the hands of Krishna, who's a charioteer really. So Krishna represents the intellect or the soul or whatever. Arjun, which is sitting inside. So the chariot is a human body. You could say the chariot is a human body. Horses are the senses. Krishna is the intellect or mana or whatever.
The soul?
More intellect or soul.
Okay.
Arjun sitting inside is mana.
The mind.
The mind and the man. Usually the mind is not the correct word in English. It's called mana. Not the heart. Mana. The thought process, where everything, your feelings and emotions emerge from there. So, and man is very fickle-minded. It's not stable. It keeps on, it wants everything. Today it's happy, tomorrow it's unhappy.
It's unsure, is what you say.
It's unsure. Chalaiman, the word in Sanskrit is not nishchal. It keeps on moving from one place to another. Today this, tomorrow that. So our emotions are subjected to kind of a constant process of change.
True.
So man is that. And that's what really Arjun represents. He's not sure whether should I fight or should I not fight. Whether this is the right thing or not. So that's man. So it's a kind of picture. If you look at the typical picture of when you see Bhagavad Gita, a chariot with Krishna and Arjun and horses and everything. That's what really symbolic representation.
So when you beautifully say that Krishna is the soul. So in a way, are you trying to say that soul knows everything? Soul as a human soul has all the answers?
Yes, it does. But You see, the important point is that each one of us has a divine element in all of us. We are potentially divine. This is what Swami Vivekananda said. Each human being is potentially divine. And just to quote another famous French philosopher, he said, human beings are not the physical entity who come to this world for a spiritual experience. Human beings are essentially spiritual beings who come to the world for a physical experience.
Yes.
It's a very profound statement. But what happens is our essence, our core is spiritual. But once we are exposed to the word, the Maya, the material world, we are so overwhelmed that we forget our original entity.
Beautiful.
So then we get carried away. But your soul and spirit stays right within yourself. The consciousness, the awareness. The better word would be, which everyone can understand, is the word awareness.
Awareness.
Large number of people, and most of the time, we constantly perform our work in a state of complete unawareness, and then we get into trouble. Awareness is the fundamental, the most important attribute of every human being. If you perform your act with complete state of awareness, you do it very well, you do it efficiently, you do it with focus, and more importantly, you accept the consequences of that action. If you do it in a state of awareness.
Through acceptance.
You accept it. If you do something within a state of unawareness, you don't know what you've done, and you start blaming others.
Okay.
So we indulge in all kind of blame games. So Snake, he's done that, I'm not responsible. Because you're committing these acts in this state of complete unawareness. And if you listen to the voice of your own conscious, it always gives you the right answer.
Would you say awareness is more connected to the mind or the soul?
Well, the mind is only an instrument for conveying what the soul tells you.
Okay.
You see, mind is something that we can possibly experience. Soul, we don't, the word which normally ordinary people know, okay, there is a soul. We know the word in English, but we don't actually know. But mind and intellect is something, again, it's very subtle. We cannot see it like we can see our body, like a nose and ears. But we can experience, yes, I think I have a mind, I have an intellect. But the mind and the intellect are heavily influenced by the voice of the soul.
Consciousness.
So, yes, the consciousness. And because actual work is delivered by your thought process, by your sense of discrimination which your intellect gives you. So, but at a very basic level, yes, what you're saying may be right, that the mind gives you, because that's where your thought process begins. But the mind is not acting in isolation. It is kind of governed, it is kind of part of the overall system that we call spiritual, which is the soul. So if the mind and the intellect listen to the soul, connect to the soul, you'll never go wrong.
Coming back to Bhagavad Gita and your career, of course, you were an IAS officer. There was a lot of leadership decisions that you had to make. There was a lot of managerial decisions you had to make. How did Bhagavad Gita help to make that decisions and change the course of the decision making that you had to make in the times of serving as an IAS officer?
Yes, I must say that Bhagavad Gita was a very, very powerful instrument that I had, which guided me at every step. One of the important things that happens whenever you're doing some act or you're performing a duty or responsibilities. So the first message where I talked about, you keep on performing a duty with complete focus and don't worry about the results. So, and don't be attached to anything at all, right? So that gave me a complete sense of objectivity. I did not get, drowned into the word of aspirations or desires. As an officer working in the government, I got my salary, I got my perks and everything. So I was quite happy with that. I didn't sort of greed for anything more, neither in a position of power. I himself gave you a lot of position of power, so there's no need for hankering after anything else. That also gave me strong strength to withstand anything wrong which is being done. The kind of system that we have, there are politicians, there are officers, there are people they sometimes come up with some very unreasonable demands, and they also put pressure upon you. So Bhagavad Gita comes to your stand. You do the right thing. Don't yield to. Nothing's going to happen. You will probably get to harm only if you do something wrong. So absence of any sense of greed, any sense of great attachment, and complete focus on my job that was there at my hand. That really essentially came from Bhagavad Gita. And when people realize that here is a person who is not unnecessarily, intimidated by political pressures, or who means business, who would like to perform a bit of a selfless service. In fact, IAS is one particular service where you have the enormous opportunity for you to serve people.
Correct.
And if you do it with the sense of detachment, where you're not looking for any benefits for yourself, you can do remarkable work. And there are numerous examples in bureaucracy in India that people have done phenomenal work in rural areas. And you can quote several examples and instances. I also had some certain events that came in my life where I was tested against very powerful people in the country. I'd not like to name at this stage, but the highest level of power and authority, I had to withstand the pressure, and I did that. And I think Bhagavad Gita surely came to my help in that regard.
So for leaders, one thing that is necessary is to keep your head down and do your work, is what you're trying to say.
Yes, leaders really have to be, first of all, very focused on their work, very passionate about what they're doing, commitment, and be selfless. You see, if the leader wants everything for himself, then people watch you. If this guy he becomes the leader of the organization only to help himself, to empower himself. So, first of all, it's important for you to be very, very focused, selfless, and be very humble. Humility is a great hallmark of when you realize that everyone in this world is exactly the same as you are. The Bhagavad Gita very clearly tells you that I'm in everyone, everyone is me. So there's no difference between you and I. You may be of a different age, he may be of a different background, but exactly the same. So when all of us are exactly the same, where is the need for us to start behaving and start, yelling at others or discriminating against others? So therefore, that is a very important leadership: humility, steadfastness, commitment, focused, and selfless service. So these are important leadership qualities, and so therefore,
nice.
You can learn it from Bhagavad Gita.
Most people read Bhagavad Gita as Arjuna, what I've come to understand. But is there another perspective to read it as Krishna? Will it change your perspective, or will it change your way of reading the Gita and applying it in your own life?
You see, if you look at the Vedanta philosophy, and Bhagavad Gita is part of that, when we talk about Vedanta, it actually comprises Upanishads and Brahma Sutras and Bhagavad Gita, what we call Vedanta. And the highest statement in Vedanta philosophy is Aham Brahmasmi. I'm the God, I'm the universe. Tattvamasi, you are that. Now, when you understand that, when you internalize that message, there is fundamentally no difference between Arjuna and Krishna. Krishna is a particular stage. He says, I'm in you and you are in me. So it doesn't make a difference. Important thing is that Krishna, in that particular situation that he was in, he, like the most iconic two verses of Bhagavad Gita, where everyone can understand, relates to, Yada yada dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutthanam dharmasya tadatmanam sajjamyam paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma sanstapna arthaya sambhavami juge juge. He says, Krishna says that every time when the evil raises its head above the good and good people are persecuted, tormented, I appear in the human form in this universe, in different time zones. So to maintain that, restore the balance of power, balance of equality, goodness and evil. So he comes in human form. And the question that you asked, also has another kind of insight into it. Arjun never understood, never realized that Krishna is of that stature. For a very, very long time. He says, you're a nice man, very well learned and superhuman being, this, that, and other, till the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, by the way, has 18 chapters, 700 shloks. Till the 10th chapter, when Krishna realized that Arjun was quite happy listening to what the advice of Krishna, you do this, this must happen, this is the word, this is the form of yoga, you should perform that, you shouldn't be angry, you should be a stable mind, all these things, great messages that he delivered. But till the 10th or 11th chapter, Arjun continued to recognize him, treat him as a friend, as a sakha. Then Krishna had to take a call that, look, this man, it's very important for him to be inspired to to fight. Otherwise, my purpose would get defeated. So he showed him what is called his Virat Swarup, Divya Swarup.
Okay.
And then Arjun realized that, look, who was I talking to? This is universal God, Brahman. Just must also tell you, when this Virat Swarup came in, this is the connect with the Western world. Robert Oppenheimer, who was the inventor of atom bomb, and also responsible partly for dropping a bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan in 1945 or something. So when Robert Oppenheimer quotes from Bhagavad Gita, he says, I could see the light almost like the equivalent of 1,000 suns in the sky. So he quotes from chapter, I think 11 or 12 or something. So, and he was one, Albert Einstein, Aurobindo, Swami Vivekananda, Warren Hastings, who was the Governor General of India. They were beautifully influenced. Annie Besant, Albert Einstein, of course, I mentioned. There, Ralph Emerson, Aldous Huxley. These are some of the names that people who, sort of really swore by the great profound message of Bhagavad Gita, and mightily influenced by the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. So that is the kind of overall aura or influence Bhagavad Gita wields in different parts of the world. So it is not limited only to you and I and Indians, but everyone.
Now, since you're talking about the Western world and the change of times that we've seen, the technological advancement, the change of people's greed, people's needs and wants, how do you think we should stay grounded and use the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita and the times that are changing, and how should we improve our lifestyle, for one, through the Bhagavad Gita?
See, it's extremely important and a very topical question that you're asking. This current generation has been mightily influenced by the strong technological disruption that is happening. We even have the latest one, which is called Chat GPT, which is coming in, which has probably changed the way people think. Everything is in fingertips. Which really means that now what is the other side of this? That you got everything in the digital mode, so you don't need to think. So your creativity is gone for a toss. Now, human mind's basic function is critical thinking and creativity. You cannot possibly hypothecate or mortgage your thought process to any external agency. There are signs where people are saying that technology, the machine intelligence, artificial intelligence might overtake the human intelligence. But that's going to be one part of this show. What I'm worried about is that we have stopped using our own huge powerhouse of intellect that we have. Every human brain has got something like 50 billion neurons.
Correct.
And I can't think of any computer which can have that capacity, but we don't use it. And here is something, the technology happening. Okay, you don't need to use it anyway. I'm here to answer all your questions. So what will happen? So both on terms of you stop thinking, I have strong fear that if you do not use your cerebral capacity, your neurons, incidence of Parkinson's diseases, Alzheimer's is going to increase. The mental issues would possibly become much stronger in the times to come. Your neurons need exercise. Neurons need constant usage all the time. There's so many of them. Like, for example, if you don't exercise, you keep sitting at one place, your body gets fossilized. Your muscles are kind of frozen. Same is true of our We worried about our body and muscles and joints, etc. But why aren't we worried about our mind? It needs a regular kind of an exercise, a very intensive exercise. And technology is going to replace that. So I'm worried about that. And children also, apart from the usual problem that we have hooked on to the screen time,
Correct.
your vertebrae is going to get affected. Most of the people are, you will start looking at like that. And it took millions of years for people to getting erect posture, from the humanoids to the Homo sapiens, etc. Now we're going back. So it brought part of the evolution.
It's going
But
back.
we're going back.
Yeah.
So that seems quite not the right thing to do. So we really need to sort of look back and pause and see as to in what manner are we going to use technology. Technology is a good servant, but it's a bad master. We can't allow it to ride roughshod on our.
So what could be the solution for an individual who wants to improve his life in the times of change of technology?
Yeah, so therefore I think what is important for you, for all of us, to create a balance, like what is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita also, moderation. Use technology. I know technology is here to stay. We can't wish it away. And it's a very efficient method of a very good tool for us to get results efficiently, more productively. But two things. Use it in a moderate manner. Don't use it everywhere in every situation. Your neurons get adequate exercise, so you stay alive. You're alive not because of your muscles and joints. You're alive because your mind is alive.
Because you're active.
Intellect, your brain is alive. And you cannot sort of let machines take over the function of your brain. So that's where we need to yukta cheshtasya karmasu, work in moderation. Use technology in a moderation manner. The technology is now completely overtaking the ingenuity in people, the creativity. Inventions, we need a lot of good inventions and discoveries that happened during 20th century, 19th century, etc. But they haven't been happening now. We need to use that, and we can certainly use technology for a further, and it can also be beautifully used, and people in West have started using it in understanding the complexity of the mind. The thing like MRIs and things like advanced stage of, you can look into your brain and how the neurons function, how the mind functions. It can be a great asset, a great assistance for people to understand the anatomy of a mind, the behavior of a mind. Why do people behave the way they do? And then do proper course correction. So that's where I think we need to use it and leverage it.
The next question that comes to my mind after this question that I asked you before was, can you fill up our audience with the 10th avatar and the knowledge of 10th avatar that is due to come in due of time? 9th avatar was our Lord Krishna. Now 10th avatar, and how and why will it appear?
Let avatars come and go. We should be blessed if they come. Buddha came, they were blessed. Krishna came, and they were people of great. But the one particular advantage of these avatars that you talked about is, let's seek inspiration from their life. Let's treat them not as gods or demigods. One of the beautiful statements that I often quote is that, and said by some people, that we must humanize our relationship with God, like we treat human. And divinize our relationship with human beings.
Well said.
Let's treat people as like you, is
as
divine.
God.
Yeah, but be in human touch with what we are doing. We're keeping our gods inside the temple, far away, removed. We can't even go and touch in sanctum sanctorum. Let's get close to him. And another thing which we must mention, that we shouldn't be talking about fear of God.
That is
We
absolutely.
should talk about love of God. God is not a demon. Asur nahi, Rakshas nahi. We should be scared of. We should be scared of him only if you're doing something wrong. And that in any case but the love of God is something which is more important. That is what we need to. And that would come when we follow the principles, the lives and messages that how they lived this life. When they came, what is the purpose and did they execute it? Love and affection. Like for example, Ram, Maryada Purushottam. What all did he do? So if we learn from their experience as human beings and not say that they are gods, we can't do it, brush it, then that's the biggest lesson we can get from these avatars.
I respect you for that answer, because I had a question based on the future, which is uncertain, right? And you answered really well, I must say that. So, one final question I would like to ask you is that, everyone has a different interpretation of Bhagavad Gita. Everyone has a different takeaways from the Bhagavad Gita. What are the top 3 takeaways, your interpretation of Bhagavad Gita, that you would like to share with the audience and that stays with you and has enhanced your life in multiple ways?
You see, I'll speak 3-4 very fundamental precepts which affect every human being. First of all, perform your duties like the Karma Yoga philosophy. Perform your duties with a perfect devotion, perfect dedication. Whatever comes your way with sense of gratitude. Don't go and pounce upon the possessions of others. Don't lust for others. If you do hard work, you do with commitment, your results would also be very good. And nobody is saying you reject it. You take them with grace. So perform your duty with commitment and accept whatever comes to you with sense of gratitude and grace. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that treat everyone as like you treat yourself. Like they say, do in Rome as the Romans do. That's something that has created a lot of conflicts in our society. One of the very important messages Bhagavad Gita also says, everyone is exactly the same. And yomam pashyati sarvam chama pashyati. Sarvabhuta sthanman sarvabhutani chatmani. I am in everyone and everyone is me. Now, are we doing actually in practice or not? Now, very important message will emerge from this. If I am exactly the same as you are, then I would not hurt you. I will not abuse you. If I am abusing you, what am I doing? I am abusing myself. So if I treat you exactly the same, however difficult it may be, and the sense of equality and equity, I think is extremely important for our world. Problems that exist, conflicts and wars and terrorism and crimes that take place in society, in the world, are purely on account of difference, I and you, me and they. Moment we start distinguishing, you are a Muslim, I am a Hindu, you are a Sikh, and so we treat ourselves differently. Spirituality doesn't say that. And moment I start recognizing, Shivam is exactly the same as I am, then I have a good bonding with you. So that's the second thing, equity, equality. Third thing is that whatever you do that as in kind of an offering to God. A very beautiful statement somebody made, that do we come into this world and go out from this world, or are we the product of this world and back we go into it? We often say, I've come into this world. Where have you come from? Have you come from Jupiter? Have you come from Mars? You're coming right from the 5 elements that created you, and go back into this.
The 5 elements as well.
And you haven't come with anything, you don't go back with anything. The famous example, Alexander, he says, when you take my body, put my hand out for everyone to see that I'm going empty. So these are some of the stories of great people which actually must teach us these lessons. So whatever you earn, whatever riches that you have, treat them as a kind of a belonging to the universal God. You're only a trustee. This is a famous example. Swami Vivekananda, once he was in America, Rockefeller came and wanted to meet him. So he waited for some time. And Rockefeller had made huge amount of money by the time, in oil and other things also. So Vivekananda told him, look, you're not a rich, this doesn't belong to you, you're a trustee. And that really sort of inspired, that's why he's Rockefeller Foundation, he gave a lot of money into charity. But how many of us can think about that? So these are some of the very, very fundamental, basic messages that are difficult for people to, but then, nothing which is good was found there's no shortcut to immortality. Right. You really got to work hard for it. That's where these thoughts come in.
Thank you so much. I could go on with my questions and I could, pick your brain and keep going on it, but I think we have enough knowledge and wisdom already thrown at the audience. Would you like to end this conversation with any of your favorite shloka?
One of the most profound shlokas that I submit myself to, which is a form of a complete surrender to God, eventually. We all, part of Him is to need to go back to Him. So in the 18th chapter, there's a very beautiful shloka, which if you don't mind if I can sing it for you, for your audience. And
As the audience do not know yet, you're also a musician and a singer. So I will be honored to hear your voice. And
so this is one of the books that I wrote, you probably are aware, has also CDs, where I try to compose music for 100 shlokas in Bhagavad Gita in different rags. So let me try and briefly attempt that for the audience. And it's in rag Yaman, which is a very popular rag. Sarvadhar man parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Sarvadhar man parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshishyami ma shucha. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshishyami ma shucha. Mokshishyami ma shucha, mokshishyami ma shucha, ma shucha, ma shucha. Briefly it says, give up everything in this world, just come into my refuge, only my refuge. Krishna tells Arjuna, I shall absolve you of all your responsibilities, all your sins. Just don't bother. So, sense of surrender, ultimate surrender to God. Samarpana, that's the word. That brings eternal peace and bliss to you. That is the shloka I'm intensely fond of.
Wow. I literally have goosebumps after hearing you sing. So. Thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate this conversation with us. I hope the audience has a lot of takeaways and a lot of learnings through your words.
You see, just last bit for the audience let me share just one with you. That again in chapter 18, one of the reasons why I'm passionate about Bhagavad Gita, why I want to, whenever somebody says, you want to talk about it, I jump at the opportunity. You know why? Because Krishna mentioned, Yaimam paramam guhyam madbhakteshu abhidhasyate bhaktim mai param kritva mame vaishesi asansham. He says somebody who spreads the message of Bhagavad Gita. I think it applies to you also. Whoever spreads the message of Bhagavad Gita amongst my devotees is the person who's dearest to me. And he attains me without any problem. Nobody else in this world is dearer to me than one who talks about Bhagavad Gita.
That's what happened. I happened to message you once, and you got on it the next day, and you were ready to give your time to it.
Absolutely.
And I really appreciate that.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the episode and got something meaningful out of it, make sure to like, share and subscribe. Until then, keep reimagining yourself and know that the power of change lies within you.